People are on their feet. We'll move to question time. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Yesterday, in response to a relatively direct question from Senator Faruqi, you refused to rule out changes to negative gearing under a future Labor government. Minister, will you take this opportunity? You said, "Oh, I don't think so." Will you take this opportunity to be clear and to rule out any future changes to negative gearing?
Minister Wong.
I do remember that answer yesterday, and I have to confess, and I do confess this to the Senate chamber, that probably didn't listen to all of the content after the first bit of, why won't you negotiate with us, which I thought really was such an interesting question to ask, given that the bill that we are talking about has been before the parliament for 290 days. Amazing how long the Australian Greens can actually work to not get a vote because they're so worried about voting with Mr Dutton. That's what it is. Our housing policy is clear. It does not include the tax changes that you reference. It includes the bill before the chamber, and what I would say to you is that you should support the legislation.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Well, thanks very much, President. I note that our policy on stage 3 tax cuts was clear as well, until it changed. In her 2015 book, Two Futures, the now Housing Minister, Ms O'Neill, said we need to wind back negative gearing and argue the case to do so. Minister, given your tricky words that you're choosing to use now and your refusal to rule out explicitly changes to negative gearing, can you rule them out now, or how can Australians believe Mr Albanese?
The time for asking has expired. Minister Wong.
Well, this isn't. Let's just be clear what we're doing here. Those opposite are voting with the Australian Greens to stop houses being built. That's what's happening. Those opposite are voting with the Australian Greens to stop housing being built. So in an attempt to try and find something else to talk about, they bring up a scare campaign from many years ago.
Order.
The Treasurer has made clear that we have no plans to change negative gearing arrangements. But what I would say to those opposite, instead of talking about what we're not doing, why don't you talk about what we're doing? Why don't you allow us to bring on a vote on the bill? And why, for a change, would you do something other than just vote no? Because you vote no, you vote no, and you vote no. And the reason you do is you don't have any positive plans for Australia. You're not about helping people. You're simply about obstructing.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Well, thanks, President. Prior to the last election, the Prime Minister said in relation to the stage 3 tax cuts, "My word is my bond." And then he and all of you kept saying, "Our policy is clear," as you've just said about negative gearing. Minister, the government broke its word on stage 3 tax cuts, on superannuation changes, on industry-wide employer bargaining, on its promise not to touch franking credits. It's broken its word again and again. How can anybody believe you when you now won't make a crystal-clear statement on negative gearing?
Birmingham. Order. Order. Minister Wong.
So what happened on stage 3? Do we remember what happened on stage 3? Did Mr Dutton say he was going to oppose it? Did Mr Dutton say he was going to oppose it before miraculously they voted for it? Miraculously they voted for it. And now they come in here having a go about tax cuts that they eventually, reluctantly, voted for because they were the right thing to do. I mean, that really is a demonstration of how, frankly, pathetic the opposition is, where they are now trying to whip up a fear campaign around tax cuts that they supported. And if we want to talk about people not telling people the truth, tell us about the cuts, $315 billion worth of cuts.
The time has
Senator
expired.
Hume wants to...
Order. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Can the minister please explain the Albanese Labor government's plans to boost housing supply, help first home buyers and ensure more Australians have a safe and secure home?
Great question.
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Walsh, for your question. And I know how much you have worked for a more just Australia, a fairer Australia, and part of that is housing. Part of that is housing, and those of us on this side want every Australian to have a safe place to call home. Every Australian to have a safe place to call home. And that's why we're investing more to build more homes, investing more to support renters, and investing more to help people buy a home sooner. There is $32 billion worth of initiatives under our Homes for Australia plan, and a key part of that plan is our Help to Buy scheme, a landmark Help to Buy scheme, a straightforward scheme of shared equity to enable people to get into the housing market earlier. Than they would otherwise. Now, that scheme was introduced into this parliament some 290 days ago. In November of 2023, passed the House in February 2024, 200 days ago. But you know, it hasn't passed this place. Why? Because Mr Dutton and Mr Bant are working together. That's why it hasn't passed this place. The Liberals and the Greens.
Order. Please continue, Minister.
The Liberals and the Greens have come together again to block housing policies because Mr Dutton simply says no to everything. Now, I mentioned yesterday that I thought the Liberal Party included in its values home ownership. But they're standing against home ownership. It appears they don't want home ownership to be enabled for more people. They don't want home ownership for people from low and middle income backgrounds. What happened to the Liberal Party that they are standing with the Greens in the way of home ownership for more Australians?
Thank you, Minister Wong. The time for answering has expired. Just a moment, Senator Walsh. May I invite those senators who insist upon continuing to interject and call out very loudly to put your name on the adjournment list tonight if you have so much to say. Otherwise, I remind you this is question time and you will listen in respectful silence. Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Can the minister please detail how the Albanese Labor government's housing reforms will ensure there is more social and affordable housing for those who need it?
Minister Wong.
9 years of those opposite has meant we don't have enough social and affordable housing in this country. And in fact, those opposite didn't even have a housing minister for the majority of their time in government. But what we are doing is working to ensure there is more—
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, I'm not quite sure which bit of order does not apply to you. Minister, please continue.
The first round of funding under Labor's Housing Australia Future Fund and National Housing Accord plans, we are delivering almost 14,000 new social and affordable housing. In fact, in our first term, we're delivering more, supporting more social and affordable housing than those opposite did in 9 years. Social and affordable housing is not only good for our economy, it's also the decent thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Unlike those opposite, we don't actually believe that home ownership, decent housing, should not be enabled for more Australians, because the approach of those opposite is only some Australians should be entitled to home ownership. So government ensuring that more people have access to home ownership.
Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. And thank you, Minister. Can the minister outline the obstacles standing in the way of more low and middle income Australians buying their own home?
Minister Wong.
There are 40,000 low and middle income Australians who have as their block to greater accessibility to home ownership the Greens and the Coalition. The Coalition and the Greens are standing in the way of home ownership for 40,000 low and middle income Australians. I'll take the interjection from Senator McKenzie. We actually don't think we think it's a good thing a good thing to give more Australians, 40,000 more Australians, the capacity to own their own homes. Only someone from the coalition could think that that was about politics. But let me talk briefly about the Greens. It's interesting that the Greens consistently have voted with the coalition to delay the Housing Australia Future Fund, voted with the coalition to block Build to Rent, voting with the coalition to block Help to Buy. And we know also that the member for Griffith is supporting a campaign against 3,000 social or affordable inner homes in his election.
Thank you, Minister.
So really,
the time
who do
for
you actually
answering
support?
has expired. Just a moment, Senator Hume. I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the gallery of a delegation from the Government of the Maldives as part of the Canberra Fellowship Program. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia and in particular to the Senate. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, the Leader of the Greens, Mr Bandt, was quoted yesterday listing 3 key demands of Labor in the event of a hung parliament. Mr Bandt said that in the scenario of a hung parliament, we would be pushing the next government to make big corporations pay their fair share of tax, wind back those tax breaks for wealthy property investors, and deliver some relief to renters and stressed mortgage holders. Minister, will you be upfront with all Australians and categorically rule out Labor doing deals with the Greens that result in big new taxes on Australian businesses, big new taxes on Australian homeowners and big new taxes on Australian workers?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Order across the chamber. Order. Minister Wong.
Really? In a week where the coalition of the Greens have teamed up to stop 40,000 homes for Australians, in a week where we've seen even today
Senator
the juvenile tactics in this chamber to avoid getting to a vote, after we've seen on housing the member for Griffith lead you down a path which heads him lock in step with Peter Dutton. They're like arm in arm, wandering, I don't know, what is one of the streets in Brisbane. That's what they're doing. Down the Queen Street Mall, that's what they're arm in arm down the Queen Street Mall, going, oh yeah, mate, we're right, we're just going to vote no together on everything. That's the Greens. On that week, you're going to ask me about working with the Greens. Well, have a look in the mirror.
I'm waiting for silence. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, you've had multiple opportunities yesterday to do so, but I will ask you point blank, and I'm not interested in plans. Can you make a concrete commitment that Labor will not scrap or amend negative gearing in order to secure support for a minority government with the Greens?
Oh, yes.
Minister Wong.
Senator Ayres.
I refer you to my earlier answer, Senator. And what I'd say to you too, what I'd say to you is this.
Order.
What I'd say to you is this. We all want
Minister
Senator
Wong,
Hume on
please resume your
insiders.
seat. Minister Wong, please resume seat. Senator McKenzie. Order. If you can't listen in respectful silence, please leave the chamber. Minister Wong, please continue.
We all watched Insiders when Senator Hume was...
Order.
You right? Well, I don't mind a bit, you know, but let me just have a little bit of a go before you start, all right? How about that? We all watched Senator Hume ducked and weaved on...
Minister Wong, please resume your seat.
Again.
Please resume your seat. Order.
President, on relevance, I specifically asked about negative gearing, not my performance on Insiders.
Fair point.
Thank you. Order. Order. I am having some difficulty hearing the minister because of the interjections across the chamber. So if you wish me to rule on a point of order, you need to listen in respectful silence. But I do believe the minister is being relevant, but I will continue to listen very carefully without interjections from those senators whose names I've called. Minister.
We watched as Senator Hume ducked and weaved on the $315 billion worth of cuts that she was very keen to say they were going to deliver, but very keen not to say what they would cut. I mean, what we know it would mean is cuts to Medicare, cuts to pensions, cuts to payments.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham.
Point of order. On direct relevance, President, and with 8 seconds left, perhaps the minister could at least even utter the words negative gearing to turn to the question.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I will draw the minister back to Senator Hume's question. Minister Wong.
I started by saying we have no plans to change negative gearing. But I tell you what, mate, why don't you come clean in your $315 billion?
Thank
why
you,
don't you tell people about
the
your
time
plan to cut the pension?
has expired. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, Mr Bant said that he is only interested in governing with Labor. Can you make a concrete commitment that Mr Albanese will not appoint Mr Bant or any other Greens as ministers under a Labor Greens government?
Order. Thank you, Senator Hume. Order. Minister Wong.
We are campaigning for a Labor government.
Yeah.
A Labor government that delivers housing reform. We are campaigning for a Labor government that delivers higher wages. We are campaigning for a Labor government which delivers the biggest increases in bulk billing in decades. That's what we are campaigning for. You are waltzing down the Queen Street Mall with the Australian Greens.
Your seat. Order on my left. Senator McGrath, I've called you a number of times this question time, and I invite you, as I invited Senator McKenzie, if you can't remain silent, to leave the chamber. Minister Wong, please continue.
Thank you, Chair. We are campaigning for a Labor government and Labor government's policies, and we have been. What we have witnessed this week is a continuation of the Greens political party's political decision to work with the extraordinarily negative Leader of the Opposition to team up to oppose everything. So in that week, you know what's happened? They're suddenly worried that they're actually a bit close to the Greens, so instead of actually voting separately, they now think that asking questions is going to create the political difference.
Time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Senator Wong, at the last election your government promised to fix Australia's broken environment laws. Why won't the Prime Minister work with the Greens to put in place environment laws that stop the destructive logging of our native forests and consider climate impacts in a way that would both tackle climate pollution and provide more certainty for the renewable energy industry?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister Wong.
I was just waiting to see if Senator Hanson-Young was going to call a quorum to see it, but I guess she doesn't mind being in the chamber if she gets to ask questions. She just minds being in the chamber when she might have the embarrassment of voting again with Mr Peter Dutton. Yeah. I mean, that's what it's about.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order. 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 Senator McKim, which part of order does not apply to you? Senator Waters.
President, point of order. Senator Wong needs to withdraw that reflection on my colleague, who's doing an excellent job, I might add.
Senator Waters, I don't believe that was a reflection, and I'll ask Senator Wong to continue.
Thank you. Look, I'd make a few points about.
Senator Henderson,
what am I withdrawing?
I'm the President of the Senate. You are not. I've called for order. Minister Wong, please continue.
As you know, Senator Henderson, I'm always happy to withdraw it fast, but I did point out that she called a quorum before so she didn't have to vote, which is the truth. No. So I don't know that that's actually unparliamentary, but I'm always happy to withdraw if people want me to. Well, you know that. You know that. Look, I think everyone knows that the current laws aren't working for business, and they certainly aren't working for the environment. We know.
Order on my left.
We know that the minister has been engaged in discussions. It's regrettable that to date we haven't seen, for example, the coalition engage in responsibly on this. What I would say to Senator Hanson-Young, if the issue, I think the Prime Minister has made clear his views on some of those policy matters, and that is the position of the government. And if you don't wish to be a responsible party in how you deal with these issues, then yet again what you will see is good Labor reform, which is not able to proceed because the Greens are taking too extreme in a position and the coalition are taking the opposition's position, the negative position that they always engage in.
Senator Hanson-Young, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Prime Minister's arrogant bulldozer approach to the Senate. This requires this parliament to be cooperative and collaborative. What is it about putting climate in our environment laws that triggers you so much?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. I'm waiting for order before I call the minister. Order. Minister Wong.
And well, I suppose the response might be, Senator, why are you so frightened about voting? Exactly. Why are you so frightened about voting on housing? Is it because a part of Senator Hanson-Young and her colleagues in the Senate know that the member for Griffith has led them up the garden path? Is that actually in your heart of hearts you think 40,000 houses is not a bad thing for low and middle income Australians? Do you think that's is that why you're getting so upset?
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator McKim.
Oh, thank you, President. The point of order, as I'm sure you would anticipate, is on direct relevance. This question was not about housing. It wasn't about the member for Griffith. It was about climate in our environment laws. I ask that you draw the minister to the question.
Thank you, Senator McKim. Order, Senator Watts. Order. Order on my right. I will draw the minister to Senator Hanson-Young's question. Minister Wong, please continue.
Well, there was some political statements in there. There was a number. Were a number of political statements about the Prime Minister. And what I'd say to the Senate, to Senator Hanson-Young, is if this is a bulldozer, it's a pretty slow bulldozer. I mean, 290 days you've had to deal with the housing legislation. Now you're complaining about being bulldozed. I mean, you really, it defies belief, doesn't it, the lengths to which you will go to try and justify voting with the coalition.
Senator Hanson-Young, second supplementary.
Thank you. I find it extraordinary that this government does not want to talk about the environment, native forests or climate. Why does the Prime Minister choose to be berated by the Minerals Council and the BCA executives instead of working in this place to fix our environment laws, to protect our forests from logging and to make sure we help the renewable energy industry with climate considerations?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Order. 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 Senator McKim, I've called order. That applies to you. Senator Hanson-Young, you've asked your questions. Minister Wong.
Senator, I'm tempted to talk about who goes to which events, and I'm tempted to talk about a shameful appearance by one of your members at a CFMEU rally with pictures, of the Prime Minister. I think your judgment is sound, Senator Hanson-Young, and you would not have stood on that stage with those pictures. When it comes to the challenges both on the environment but also the overarching challenge, which is climate, we are serious about action on climate and on the environment, and we have taken action. And we have ambitious targets. We have ambitious targets. We are committed to transitioning our economy. And unlike both those opposite, we believe it is possible to have a sensible environmental framework and continue economic growth. Unlike your party, we don't believe that we should be stopping economic growth. As always, it is up to Labor to chart the right course.
Senator Pratt.
President, my question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The Albanese government wants every Australian to have a safe and secure home to live in. Labor wants more Australians to be able to buy their own home. We have a comprehensive $32 billion housing plan, which is about building more houses with states and territories, supporting renters, getting more people into home ownership and making sure that people can access social housing and homelessness services when they need them. So, Minister, why is it so important that we respond to the housing crisis from every angle?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Pratt for that question. It's an important one because a comprehensive approach to the challenges in the housing market is required, and that's what the Albanese government plan addresses, and what we've done every day since we've come to government is to look at how we can use every lever and opportunity available to us to ensure that we are pushing everything we can to build more housing in Australia. Social and affordable housing is a priority because we care and support Australians who have insecure housing or don't have a roof over their head and need to access those services. And that's why we've signed that important national housing agreement with extra funds going in there for state and territory services. Renters are a priority because we know that it's hard to get a rental and that rent is often too high. We want renters to see a pathway to home ownership, and Help to Buy should be providing that pathway. Supply is the #1 housing challenge. We need more houses, we need them quick, and that's why we want to build 1.2 million houses by the end of the decade. And that's why in our 3 budgets since coming to government we have invested in housing after a decade of neglect from those opposite. They weren't interested in housing. They're interested now. They can come in and complain about it, but when they were in government they didn't do a single thing about driving supply in this country. We've got our Housing Australia Future Fund, the Help to Buy program that we'd like to get through the Senate. We've got our extra investments in First Nations housing, historic investments secured by the former Minister Burney and now being implemented by Minister McCarthy. We've increased rent assistance. We're working with states and territories. We're putting more money into skills in the construction sector, and we'll continue to do this. It's a comprehensive plan that should be supported by this Senate.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
Thank you. The Albanese government's comprehensive housing plan has set an ambitious goal of building 1.2 million houses by the end of the decade. To do this, we have to build more houses and remove barriers that prevent houses from being built. So what policies has the government designed to support the construction of more houses?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Gallagher.
Well, thanks very much, Senator Pratt. Yes, the debate should be all about supply. We need to build more houses more quickly in this country. And every single vote against a Labor housing bill is a vote against more housing for Australians. Now, according to the Greens political party and their spokesperson on housing, housing supply isn't a problem in this country. And he said on Insiders, Australia has enough homes for people to live in, said the member for Griffith on Insiders. But I would trust the experts over the blockers, including the Grattan Institute, who have said that the long-term solution to Australia's housing crisis is to build more houses. The Greens have blocked more housing for Australians at every step. They delayed the Housing Australia Future Fund. We're now trying to get help to buy through. And I wonder whether it's because out there in the community they are against housing. We've got them blocking housings for Australians in Brisbane, in Sydney and even in Port Melbourne, where they're locally lobbying against housing.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Addressing housing supply has been a priority for the Albanese Labor government. Yesterday we saw the Prime Minister announce that Labor will deliver 13,700 new social and affordable homes under our first round of the Housing Australia Future Fund. Why is building more houses the priority, and are you aware of other ideas that pose a challenge to Australians to us building more homes for Australians.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Pratt for the supplementary. Well, we want more people to be able to get into the market sooner with a smaller deposit and lower repayments. And that's why we can't believe why the opposition and the Greens are standing in the way of that, because that is actually what they're doing when they're teaming up, when they're holding hands on all these housing votes in the parliament. Instead, of course, those opposite, and I'm sorry that we don't have the spokesperson for ransacking your super here today, but the opposition want Australians to mortgage their future by raiding superannuation for housing. Expert after expert has said the same thing. Super for housing will simply increase prices. And it's not even just the experts. The opposition leader once said, "It's not good policy. You don't want to fuel the prices." And the deputy opposition leader said, "Young people need their super for retirement, not to try to take pressure off an urban housing bubble." Senator Hume even said super for housing will bump up housing prices.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator McAllister. Senator, this morning on Radio National, a woman who was referred to as Kate shared the story of her brother, a 24-year-old man who tragically took his own life because he could not escape the predatory tactics of the gambling industry. Kate gave evidence to the Murphy inquiry, and she's asking for the government to heed its findings and put in place a full ban on gambling advertising. She doesn't want other families to experience the awful loss that hers has. But after a year of hearing nothing, she's asking, what's it going to take? Minister, can you answer Kate's question and tell us, what is it going to take for your government to listen to the evidence and ban all gambling advertising?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Senator Pocock asks about the interview provided by a woman who was referred to as Kate this morning. Can I start by really acknowledging the public contribution that this woman is making and her courage in telling her story publicly, and the contribution that I understand that she made to the inquiry into gambling harms. And I say to Senator Pocock that the government has made it clear that we are deeply concerned about gambling harms. It's one of the reasons that we have taken so many steps since election to deliver reforms to prevent online wagering harm. Indeed, I would assert that it is more reform has been undertaken in the last 2 years than was delivered in the preceding decade. And those reforms include banning the use of credit cards for online gambling, introducing new evidence-based taglines in wagering advertising, strengthening classification of gambling-like features in video games to protect children, establishing mandatory customer ID verification for online wagering, and most importantly, launching the National Self-Exclusion Register, BetStop, for problem gamblers. More than 28,000 Australians have now registered, and 40% of those have opted for self-imposed lifetime bans. And BetStop is the most effective harm reduction initiative to date in terms of directly helping Australians who are experiencing harm. And I encourage anyone who is experiencing harm from online wagering to visit www.betstop.gov.au. The Senator asks about our model to reduce wagering ads, and we are consulting on this at the moment. We are focused on objectives, reducing exposure of children.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Thank you, Minister. My question was about gambling advertising. This young man's family say that he was hounded to death by Sportsbet through an endless stream of advertising and direct inducements like bonus bets. This morning, Kate said, "I really feel that those inducements made him feel the only way out was to end his life." Minister, if you're not going to talk about gambling advertising and clearly not going for a full gambling ad ban, can you at least confirm to us that the government will ban online gambling inducements?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister McAllister.
Thanks, President. Well, as I started to indicate in my answer to your primary question, we're consulting on a proposed model to reduce wagering ads, and we're focused on 3 outcomes: reducing the exposure of children to gambling ads, breaking the nexus of wagering and sport, and tackling the targeting and saturation of ads. Now, the government continues to consult with stakeholders, and I would make the additional point that these reforms to wagering advertising will form just one part of the government's comprehensive response to the 31 recommendations from the parliamentary inquiry. We understand that advertising reform is complex. Industry stakeholders and harm advocates, for different reasons, are putting their views forward, and we are considering multiple channels over which advertising is delivered, not just TV and radio, but digital platforms and social media where advertising targets vulnerable Australians.
Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
And thank you, Minister. The government certainly making it more complex than the Murphy Review recommended, which was a full ban on gambling advertising. The Prime Minister said that he doesn't think gambling ads should be shown during G-rated programs. How about the following? Lego Masters, Glee, The Simpsons, Young Sheldon, Bondi Vet, Home and Away. All of these programs are PG-rated, all shown in family viewing times. Does your government think gambling ads should be shown during these programs?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Well, as I've indicated, the government is consulting with stakeholders. It is complex. It's important that we hear views, that we avoid unintended consequences, and we take the time to get it right. And I'm not in a position to confirm the outcome of those consultations. The Minister will update the chamber and update the parliament when those consultations are concluded. But it is obvious that meaningful action is required. The number of people betting on sports has doubled in the last 5 years. More than a quarter of all men aged 18 to 24 and a third of men aged 25 to 34 now bet on sport, and 10% of sports bettors are classified as having a problem with gambling. Australians lose more than $25 billion in gambling every year. It's the highest per capita in the world. And it's why we need to get the reforms right to deliver harm reduction and cultural change.
Thank you, Minister. Senator... let's go to you, Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister representing the Attorney-General, Senator Watt. A recent independent review recommended the government provide an extra $459 million a year to the legal assistance sector and $215 million of emergency funding for this year alone to ensure frontline services can keep up with the urgent needs in the community. 2 weeks ago, your government committed a pitiful $100 million a year after indexation to help these services meet increasing demand. This is less than a quarter of what is needed, Minister. As more and more First Peoples, women, children and vulnerable people are left without help, why has the government chosen to choke frontline services of the funding they need?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Thorpe. With respect, Senator Thorpe, I'm not sure that those figures that you're quoting are correct. I've said previously that our government, and in particular the Attorney-General, as someone who's spent a lot of his life working with community legal centres, is a very strong supporter of the community legal sector and has actually delivered far more funding than the figures that you've quoted have referred to. The Prime Minister's significant announcement following National Cabinet last week demonstrates our government's commitment to access to justice. First Ministers have signed heads of agreement for a new National Access to Justice partnership, and the new $3.9 billion agreement includes an $800 million increase on current funding levels for the legal assistance sector, plus a commitment to ongoing funding. Every part of the sector will benefit from this $800 million boost, which will be shared between community legal centres, women's legal services, legal aid commissions, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services and family violence prevention and legal services. And this is the biggest single Commonwealth investment in legal assistance ever. And I congratulate the Attorney-General for his advocacy on this within government, and of course congratulate the other ministers involved who have made this assistance happen.
Please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Point of order. It's not a It's not a speech for you
Senator Thorpe,
to talk about the Attorney-General.
Senator Thorpe, that is a debating point, so please resume your seat. Thank you. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thanks, President. So the package the government has delivered will provide pay parity for the community legal sector so that lawyers and other workers in CLCs, ATSLs, women's legal services and family violence prevention and legal services, who are mostly women, will no longer have to accept being paid up to 30% less than their counterparts in legal aid commissions. This investment will mean that they can help more Australians and help more women safely leave and recover from violent relationships. By providing ongoing funding to the sector, we're helping to end the destructive uncertainty created by the former government, which left a decade of chronic underfunding in the legal assistance sector and a funding cliff.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Legal Services has described the insufficient announcement as a betrayal, saying it will mean only a fraction of people who need help will get it, including victim survivors of domestic, family and sexual violence. The Chair said that the announcement confirms the government thinks that is okay. Minister, do you think that is okay?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Well, I certainly think it's a very good thing that this government, the Albanese Labor government, has invested another $800 million in the community legal sector, beyond funding that was already in the budget and certainly beyond anything we've seen from any government before. My understanding is that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services in particular will be beneficiaries, as they should be, of the extra funding and what it will do for pay parity, and particularly for the women who work in those legal services. And as I say, the $800 million that we have dedicated is in addition to current funding which is already being provided. So this does mean that all parts of the community sector involved in legal advice will receive more funding. That includes Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services. They do terrific work and they deserve the extra funding that they'll be receiving as a result of our government's decision.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
All this government spin is smoke and mirrors to deceive people and the sector, and you know it. Does your government recognise that unless you increase funding for this sector, more vulnerable women and children will be turned back to violence, more kids will be lost to lifetime of incarceration and more people will die in custody? Will your government accept responsibility for this?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Well, again, Senator Thorpe, with respect, I don't think it is accurate or fair, whether it be to the government or the legal services concerned, to describe an extra $800 million investment by this government as smoke and mirrors. Quite the contrary. I think it's actually substantial extra investment that will go a long way to ensuring, firstly, that the clients of those legal services—
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
It's point of order on relevance.
The minister is being relevant. Senator Thorpe.
I asked about taking responsibility for the women who will be turned away from domestic violence services and the children who will be incarcerated and the people who will die in custody. Do you take responsibility?
Senator Thorpe, I indicated that the minister is being relevant and I will listen. Senator Thorpe, you're not in a debate with me. I will continue to listen carefully to the minister's response. Minister? Senator Thorpe, order. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thanks, President. I think all of us are aware that for some time community legal services, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services, have been struggling with the level of demand for their services, particularly in the family violence space. And that's exactly one of the reasons why our government has taken the decision to provide another $800 million in funding to services like that. It's exactly about ensuring that legal services don't have to turn away anywhere near as many people as they have previously. And the reason they had to do that was because of the gross underfunding that we inherited from the former government, and now we're fixing it. An extra $800 million is a significant extra investment.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone.
Thanks a lot, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, my good friend Senator Farrell. You're also my good friend. In fact, all the senators here are good friends.
Order.
I note the announcement of a record investment in Commonwealth rent assistance by the Albanese Labor government, which will soon support thousands of people in my home state of Victoria. Minister, what will the increase in rent assistance mean for Australian renters, and what is standing in the way of making renting easier and fairer for these Australians?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Ciccone for his question and the wonderful work he does in the housing space for the great state of Victoria. I commend the senator for his interest in this area and his advocacy in his home state. As the senator knows, too many Australians are struggling with high rent. Australians are doing it tough, and lack of affordable housing is a very big part of that story. That's why the Albanese Labor government is helping nearly 1 million households around Australia with the cost of rent by delivering yet another increase in the rate of Commonwealth rent assistance. This is the second year in a row when we've increased rent assistance, making it the first back-to-back increase in more than 30 years. And for the thousands of renters in your home state of Victoria, Senator Ciccone, that means less of a pinch when the rent is due. But right now, these Green senators up here are standing with the Liberals and the Nationals opposing Labor's build-to-rent bill, which will build more affordable rental homes and make life easier for renters. The Liberals, the Nationals and the Greens have had a chance to improve the lives of renters, and yet they refuse. The Albanese Labor government is committed to delivering more affordable rentals right around the country, so I ask the Liberals, Nationals and the Greens to work with us to do that right here and now.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thanks a lot, President, and I thank the Minister for that very comprehensive answer. One of the most common barriers faced by many people in my home state of Victoria when it comes to buying their own home is being able to put down a deposit. Now, how is the Albanese government making it easier for renters to achieve the great Aussie dream of home ownership, and how realistic are alternative policies?
Thank you, Senator Ciccone. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and once again thank Senator Ciccone for his first supplementary question. And Senator, you are right. One of the biggest challenges for a lot of Australians looking to buy a home is being able to put down a house deposit, particularly when they are already struggling to pay the rent. Through the Help to Buy scheme, the Albanese Labor government would help Australians slash the size of their deposit and their mortgage. We're ready to help Australians who otherwise wouldn't be able to purchase a home at all. The Liberals, Nationals and the Greens have a chance to support Aussie home ownership, and on behalf of every aspirational Australian, I hope one day they finally do.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thanks again, President, and thank you again, Minister. What could put these substantial increases in the Commonwealth rent assistance at risk, and what is standing in the way of the government's aim to support low and middle income Australians into home ownership?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Ciccone for his second supplementary question. And if there's one thing that could put renters at risk, and one thing that would make it harder for Australians to get into a home, it's the Greens teaming up with the Liberals and the Nationals to block and delay. We went to the last election with a comprehensive Homes for Australia plan, a plan that will help make it easier to rent and easier to buy a home. Because unlike those opposite, we are serious about making the dream of home ownership a reality. We're serious about building the homes that Australians need, and it's time for the Liberals, the Nationals and the Green political parties to stop blocking and help us build right now.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Watt. The Australian reported yesterday that a Colombian man who was convicted of sexually offending against a teenager has been allowed to remain in Australia under the Albanese Labor government's Direction 110. Minister, will the government immediately intervene to reverse the AAST's decision and cancel the offender's visa?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Wong. Sorry. Sorry, yes, Senator Watt, sorry.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Patterson, for the question. I have no intention of announcing a minister's decision, especially when it's a different minister, not myself, about a particular immigration matter in the middle of question time. It would be highly inappropriate to do so, and that's clearly a decision to be made by Minister Burke. I'm not aware of whether he's made that decision yet, but of course he'll evaluate that. But it's an opportune time to remind the chamber of the absolutely disgraceful record of Mr Dutton as the Home Affairs Minister on these matters. Now, I know you don't want to hear it. I know you don't want to hear it. I know you don't want to hear it. But the problem when you raise this, and he definitely doesn't want to hear it. He definitely doesn't want to hear it.
Minister Watt. I'll just wait for silence. Senator Patterson.
Point of order on direct relevance, President. The minister helpfully signposted that he had no intention of answering the substantive question and has now moved on to unrelated matters. I ask you to draw him back to the question or sit him down.
Thank Minister Watt.
I think it's been, on the point of order, it's been the practice in this place for ministers to be clear about what their response is to the substantive and then to be permitted to make broader comments in relation to the subject matter. That still has been considered by presidents to be directly relevant.
Thank you. The minister is being relevant, but I will direct him to confining his remarks to government matters. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you, President. And what I can say is that the Minister Burke, has been very clear that he will use his powers to remove people from this country who shouldn't be here. We've also been clear that there have been issues with the AAT process that we have been addressing, but the bottom line is that anyone who is being considered by the AAT has already had their visa cancelled by the Department of Home Affairs. Now, that stands in great contrast to the behaviour we saw from Mr Dutton as the Home Affairs Minister. In May,
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Patterson.
I
have a senator on his feet. Senator Ayres. I expect there to be silence. Senator Patterson.
On your ruling from just a moment ago, President, the minister is now openly defying your direction to confine his comments to government policy.
The minister is being relevant to the question that you asked, and I will expect him to remain substantially on government policy, which is exactly what he was doing. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, President. I think we all know that Senator Patterson's chief job in the opposition is to protect the honour of Mr Dutton, and he's doing a very good job of doing that today. But unfortunately for Senator Patterson, the truth is that while the Leader of the Opposition was the Home Affairs Minister, 2 men convicted of being accessories to murder were released on his watch. 102 convicted sex offenders, among them 64 child sex offenders, were released on Mr Dutton's watch. How come you never talk about that? How come you never talk about the fact that when Mr Dutton—
Minister Watt, I do remind you to confine your remarks to the government policy.
Well, the government's policy is significantly different to what we saw from Mr Dutton, who, while he was the Home Affairs Minister, released a man who was born in the UK in 1947, was convicted in 2016 of being an accessory to the stabbing of an associate in a cannabis operation. You never want to talk about that, do you?
Minister Birmingham. Senator Birmingham, sorry.
President, just on a point of order there, you were very clear in your instructions to the minister, who then wilfully disregarded your instructions and ignored them completely. Now, the time has all but expired but a second, President, but I would urge you to caution the minister and to ensure that, in the remaining question, he is actually relevant to the question and adheres to the rulings that you are making.
I believe that the minister was being relevant to the request that I gave him. He was using government policy and contrasting it with other policies. I'm not sure, Minister Watt, what you might say in 1 minute, but you can give it a shot if you're so inclined, or I will move to the Senator Patterson first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The report also notes that another convicted child sex offender and a man who was part of a large-scale drug operation had their visas reinstated under Direction 110, which puts ties to the community as a primary consideration in visa decisions. Minister, how many serious criminals have had their visas reinstated on Labor's watch under Direction 110?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Patterson. Well, as I've already said, the minister has made clear that he will use his powers to remove people from the country who shouldn't be here. And again, anyone who's being considered by the AAT has already had their visa cancelled by the department. But I can tell you someone who knows a bit about releasing sex offenders from immigration detention, and his name is Peter Dutton.
Minister Watt. Order. Senator Cash. Senator Cash, order. And Senator Ayres, order. Order. Senator Patterson.
President, you might be able to anticipate my point of order on direct relevance. This is a factual question. How many? The minister hasn't even entertained going to the substance of the question. He could take it on notice.
That's right.
Senator Patterson, I am reminded that the minister is not required to answer the question in the terms that you have indicated. I believe the minister is answering the question, and I will continue to listen carefully, and I'll draw him back to it if he strays from that. Thank you. And Senator McKenzie, please, no more interjections. Seriously, and Senator Cash and Senator Ayres. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. So, as I say, that's the position of this government. Let's remember that when Mr Dutton was the Home Affairs Minister, he released a man born in the UK in 1945, was convicted in 1986 of being an accessory to murder when a drug associate shot another man in what was described as a gangland execution. He released a man who was born in the UK
Minister
in 1947.
I will draw you back to Senator Patterson's question.
Well, point of order, President. May I request?
Order. Order on my left. Order. Senator Watt.
May I request your consideration of your earlier point that it was legitimate to contrast the opposition's record with the government's record. That's what I'm seeking to do.
Minister Watt, I did indeed say it was fine to contrast, but I've yet to hear the contrast.
Immigration law to ensure that the AAT has very clear directions about who can release. The contrast is Mr Dutton, who released a man who was accessory to the stabbing of an associate in a cannabis operation, who helped another man carry the victim's body to the boot of a car and dump it in a makeshift grave. That's your leader.
Order. Order. I did call for order. Senator Patterson, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Will the Minister for Home Affairs and Immigration immediately restore the stronger policies under the former coalition government, which put ties to the community as a secondary rather than primary consideration for visa decisions?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Minister Watt.
Yep. I'm surprised Senator Patterson wants to bring back the policies of the former Leader of the Opposition, like releasing people with no electronic monitoring, curfews or other conditions, no joint ABF or AFP operations. We're not going to take lessons from someone who releases hundreds of sex offenders. We're not going to take lessons.
Senator Ghosh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. I regularly hear from young Western Australians that they are struggling to save a deposit for their first homes. At the 2022 election, the Albanese Labor government promised to help more young Australians access affordable housing. How are the Albanese Labor government's housing reforms helping young people into home ownership faster?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Ghosh, for the question. And you know, like we know, the extent to which so many young Australians are worried about their capacity and opportunity to enter the housing market. We also know more young Australians do want to own their own home. And we are committed as a government to ensuring that we enable more Australians to have safe and secure housing, including young Australians, because it is at the heart of the hopes of so many young Australians to have the housing home ownership that has been enjoyed by the generations who have gone before. That is why we have a comprehensive plan designed to build more homes, including for young Australians, because unlike some of the comments we've heard in this place, both from the Coalition and from the Greens, we actually understand that bringing more houses into the housing supply is one of the ways in which you ensure that young Australians have an opportunity for home ownership. More homes means more affordable homes. And instead of condemning young Australians to continued challenging long queues for rental properties or increasingly having deposits out of reach. We want to see and support young Australians owning their own homes, which is why we announced yesterday that we will build almost 14,000 social and affordable homes across Australia, part of the largest investment in social and affordable housing in a decade. Of course, this goes alongside the largest increase to Commonwealth rent assistance in more than 30 years. And of course, there is the shared equity policy, which will help 40,000, an additional 40,000 low and middle income Australians own their own homes. Young Australians like early career nurses, early childhood, education workers and teachers would all be able to buy a home through this program.
Senator Ghosh, first supplementary.
I note that Mr Dutton and the Liberals and Nationals want young people to mortgage their future in order to own a home. How will the Albanese Labor government's ambitious housing agenda bring home ownership back into reach for young Australians without sacrificing their hard-earned retirement savings?
Thank you, Senator Ghosh. Order. Order. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we want more young people to be able to get into the housing market, and we want them to be able to get into the housing market sooner with a smaller deposit and low repayments. I mean, what's wrong with that? It seems remarkable when you say it, that you've got so many people in this chamber from opposite ends of the political spectrum, from the Mr Dutton and the National Party to the Greens, opposing this. Let me share some of the thoughts of some Australians about this. Christopher in Frankston, who says a low deposit shared equity scheme would be perhaps the only option for someone in my situation. It would provide some security. Or Anthony from Camperdown, who said, without help, I can't see how I'm going to be able to get on the property ladder in a sustainable way. The government's new scheme is a breath of fresh air, and it gives first-time buyers some hope. Now, you know, this is, and they're making fun of it.
Senator Henderson.
It says something about it that you're making fun of young people who want to buy their own homes.
Senator Ghosh, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Like generations before them, young people today want the security of home ownership. I note that the Greens political party has joined forces with Mr Dutton and the Coalition to stand in the way of meaningful support for young people. What are the obstacles preventing young people from entering the housing market, and how are the Albanese Labor government's policies delivering for young people?
Order on my left. Order. Order. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, the obstacles, Senator Ghosh, are there and there. Yep. That's where the obstacles fall. You might not like us pointing, but you do bear responsibility. Because you are working with the Australian Greens to prevent a scheme that will enable, a plan that will enable more Australians to own their own homes. I mean, this is an unholy alliance between the Greens and the Coalition. We know this country has a housing shortage. We need more homes. We need more homes more quickly in more parts of the country. Those opposite don't want that to happen. They seem to think that home ownership should be the preserve only of some. And the Australian Greens seem to want to enable and empower Mr Dutton to prevent there being more homes in this country. And with that, President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice, and I seek leave to move a motion relating to the consideration of the Help to Buy Bill 2023 and a related bill.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted, Senator Wong.
I move the motion as circulated.
So the question is, the motion is moved by the minister be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Can we have Senator Hanson's microphone on, please? Try again, Senator Hanson.
Right, Madam President, thank you. I opposed that seeking leave from the minister.
Senator Hanson, I called if leave was granted. I waited a few seconds. There was no order.
Sorry.
I waited a few seconds, and then as I put the motion you responded, so I think you were too late. But order. Senator Scarr, are you on a point of order?
Same point of order. With due respect, President, I was in close proximity to Senator Hanson. She did deny leave at the first opportunity.
With the concurrence of the Senate, but I will reiterate, Senator Hanson, I sought leave. The minister sought leave. Order. Senator Davey, leave the chamber if you wish to be objectionable. I sought an answer. There was no answer forthcoming. I started to put the motion, and then I heard you say no. So if you want to not grant leave, you need to respond in the time frame that I've allowed. However, Senator Hanson, with the concurrence of the Senate, I am willing to withdraw the need for a division. With the concurrence of the Senate, I am willing to withdraw the need for a division. Yes, thank you. The division is cancelled. I am going to put the question again. Minister Wong.
Well, first, can I be clear? I didn't hear it either, which might have been because people were yelling. No, Senator, we've just given you a courtesy of recommitting this and starting the procedure again, so it would be nice if courtesy could be extended as well. And I am saying to you, I did not hear you deny leave. So I will do it again. I seek leave to move a motion relating to consideration of the Help to Buy Bill 2023 and a related bill.
Is leave granted? Leave is not granted, Minister.
Pursuant to contingent notice, I move that so much of the standing orders be suspended as would prevent me from moving a motion to provide for the consideration of a matter, namely a motion to allow a motion relating to consideration of the Help to Buy Bill 2023 and a related bill be moved and determined immediately, and I move that the question be now put.
So the question is, the motion is moved by the minister to be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against? I believe the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. So the question is that the question be now put on the motion to suspend standing orders. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Urquhart as teller for the ayes and Senator Askew as teller for the noes. Order. There being 19 ayes and 41 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative, which means that the debate on the motion to suspend standing orders can go ahead if someone is seeking the call. Minister Watt.
Just go.
Minister Watt.
Okay. Well, President, let's be very clear about what we just saw happen. What we saw happen was the Greens Party, who say they care about young people, who say they care about housing. Look at them scurrying away from what they've just done, voting not just with Peter Dutton and the Coalition, but with Senator Pauline Hanson and One Nation.
Please resume your seat. Senator Henderson.
A point of order. I'd ask that the senator not reflect on any senator leaving the chamber, please.
The minister is not reflecting on any senator by name. Senator Henderson, and I would also, while I've got the attention of the Senate, call for order. Minister, please continue.
I can understand why all sorts of people in the chamber are very embarrassed right now, because what we saw was an unbelievable alliance, not just the coalition of the Greens and the Liberals and the Greens, but we throw in Senator Hanson and One Nation in there. We throw in Senator Babbitt and his great mate Clive Palmer. We've had the extreme right of Australian politics and the extreme left of Australian politics pair up for what purpose? To stop young people being able to buy a home. That's what we just saw here. Labor is trying to deliver on our election promise to assist young renters buy a home, and what we see from the Liberals, the Nationals, the Greens, One Nation and, of course, Clive Palmer's mate Senator Babbitt up the back there, voting together to stop young people getting to buy a home. It was our election commitment that we took to the election. It was voted for. It was in the Greens platform, and now they're running away from it, refusing to vote for it. And I've heard all the Greens over the last couple of days say, oh, we don't like this because it only assists a very small percentage of the population buy a home. That is the Greens summed up in one sentence: letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just because we can't help 100% of renters buy their own home, we shouldn't allow some people to buy their own home. The reality is that we've seen yet again the Greens team up with the Coalition and a few other people as well to stop more homes being built, to stop more young people getting a chance to buy a home, and then they have the hide to run around the inner city of all our capital cities pretending to be the people saying they want housing and they want to have young people getting their own homes. Well, the only problem with that is that if you actually have a look at what they do when they go back to their home districts, it's completely the opposite. Because right now, not only are the Greens Party here in Canberra voting against Labor legislation and not even letting it to be put to a vote because they're so embarrassed about the fact that they are stopping new housing. Right now, when they go back home, they continue to campaign against new housing in their own electorates. So we have, for example, the member for Griffith, now known as Young Setka, out there in the suburb of Woolloongabba in his electorate in the inner city of Brisbane, saying on the one hand, everyone, oh, we need more homes, but he's out there campaigning right now with the Greens Party in Queensland against almost 3,000 new social and affordable homes in the suburb of Woolloongabba. But it's also happening in the Greens-held seat of Brisbane, where the Greens member for Brisbane is opposing an apartment building in his inner-city electorate because its height, quote, would have a substantive impact on the views of existing nearby residents. So the Greens member for Brisbane says that views from existing apartment blocks are more important than new homes. But then he goes on. The Greens member for Brisbane is opposing a development that would turn an empty sand and gravel factory into 381 residential apartments because there would be too many car parks. He's also concerned that the height of the buildings would impact the unique character of this heritage neighbourhood. So more homes are great, except when Labor wants to build them. The Greens member for Brisbane is opposing a build-to-rent project in his electorate that would create 349 new apartments. This site is currently an empty lot. It is 200 metres from a major train station and walking distance to the Brisbane CBD. In his letter opposing the development, the member claimed Brisbane residents are fed up with developers, claiming they are addressing the housing crisis by increasing supply. Because, God forbid, you wouldn't want to increase housing supply, would you? That would be a terrible thing if you're a Greens member for Brisbane, or if you're a Liberal, or if you're a National, or if you're a One Nation, or if you're a Clive Palmer puppet. All of those people getting together to block more homes, led by people like the member for Brisbane. Now, probably my favourite one, though, is the member for Ryan, the Greens member for Ryan, who's campaigning against a plan to subdivide a chicken farm in the suburb of Mitchelton, a suburb I know well, to build 91 new homes. And in December last year, the member wrote to the Brisbane City Council complaining the project would, this is a chicken farm, diminish the natural character of these sites, because it's much more important to have a disused chicken farm than it is to have 91 new homes, which, on the other hand, the Greens say that they want to do. This is an absolutely disgraceful attack on young people, on people who want to buy their own home, and the guilty parties are right there before us. It's the Liberals, the Nationals, it's One Nation, and most of all, it is the Greens Party.
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks,
Senator
Deputy.
Birmingham, and then I'll come give the call to the Greens.
Thanks, Deputy President. Well, what we've seen in terms of the vote just taken and the votes underway is that the Albanese government cannot even execute a strategy to have one of its own bills defeated. It certainly can't manage to get its bill passed, but it's now not even managing to find a strategy or a means to have its bill defeated either. The Labor government has so lost control of the way in which its legislative agenda operates that they managed to convince just one non-Labor senator to vote with them. Senator Watt just tried to impugn the votes and the motives of all, basically, of the crossbench, bit selective in which ones he chose to name, but the reality, Senator Watt, is you only managed to convince one crossbencher to vote with you in that last division, because you are failing to convince people of the merits of this policy. And yes, you're failing in different directions in terms of the approaches, but none are convinced that the Albanese government's policies are going to make a jot of difference. If, of course, hot air and rhetoric were homes, the housing crisis in Australia would be solved, thanks to Minister Watt, Minister Wong and the Albanese government. But hot air doesn't count, rhetoric doesn't count, and Labor's plans don't count. After 3 Albanese government budgets, not a single extra home has been built. After lots of plans and lots of promises and billions of dollars committed to, not a single home has been built. Life's certainly not better. The government comes in and brags about the extent to which they have increased Commonwealth rent assistance. They don't acknowledge the fact they've had to do so because inflation has been so high under the Labor government, because inflation is higher for longer under this government's plans. That after these 3 Albanese Labor budgets, Australia's inflation rate remains and is now far higher than comparable economies around the rest of the world. This very week, markets around the world are preparing for an expected rate cut in the United States, one of many economies where inflation is lower than in Australia and where interest rates are going down. But not under the Albanese Labor government. Inflation is staying higher, and interest rates are staying higher for longer as a result. And what that means is that homeowners are feeling the pressure. They talk about the plans for a certain number of homes that might be built if everything goes according to plan. But what's happening today, right now, is tens of thousands of Australian homeowners are falling behind in their mortgage payments, are feeling the mortgage stress mounting up because of the failed economic policies of those opposite. Now, we've been clear all along, from the moment the Labor Party announced this policy, that we thought it was a bad policy, that the Commonwealth Government shouldn't be in the business, should not be in the business of co-owning people's homes, that the Liberal and National parties who stand for home ownership, who have it as a core value and a core tenet of our beliefs, believe that Australians should own their own homes themselves, not have the Commonwealth Government as a co-owner in their homes. That's the core and fundamental difference for us. We want to make sure that housing plans and infrastructure plans match up with population plans, not have, as this government has seen, record population pressures come in, exacerbating the housing crisis and pressures that are there. We want to make sure that the construction industry is as competitive and efficient as possible, not pile on new layers of industrial relations laws, red tape, green tape, taxes and otherwise that are driving up the costs of housing. How do you think you're going to fix a housing crisis when it costs more to build a house, when it takes longer to build a house? This is the effect of Labor's policies. So we believe you should get the fundamentals right, not say the solution is some pie-in-the-sky plan for the government to co-own your house with you and to spend billions of dollars in that approach. That, Deputy President, is why we fundamentally oppose the games the government is playing. And what we see in their tactics in here is their tactics are failing to convince anybody, even from different perspectives, of the merits of their plans, because after 3 Labor budgets, we're not seeing inflation fixed, we're not seeing interest rates going down, and we're certainly not seeing more houses being built.
Senator Faruqi.
Oh, thank you, Deputy President. Well, here we are, another day, another political stunt from the Labor Party. The Labor Party knows you can laugh, but there are millions of people out there suffering because you won't act on the housing and rental crisis the way it needs to be acted on. So you come in here, you don't have the numbers for anything. You don't have the numbers for anything because this Senate has decided that your bill will actually make things worse for 99.8% of the 5.5 million renters that live in this country. So you come in here and you try and bulldoze the will of the Senate. You know, as we said yesterday, the Prime Minister wants us all to get out of his way. But we are not getting out of his way to pass a bill that will make things much worse, that will increase housing prices. You come in here, try and spread misinformation, mistruths about the Greens and our policies. Well, we're not going to let you get away that easy. Read our Greens policies. They are very different to what your bill says. We are here to negotiate with the government. We have told you this for more than a year. Our door is open. But rather than trying to negotiate with the Greens to make things better for the millions of people who are suffering and struggling under the housing crisis, under the rental crisis, who it's become impossible to put food on the table, to pay for their bills, to go to the dentist, to visit a doctor, for young people who are one rent away from being evicted, rather than coming to the table with the Greens, negotiating something much better, which is about capping and freezing rent increases, which is about phasing out negative gearing and capital gains tax, gains tax discounts, which have turbocharged house prices for years and years now, rather than talking to the Greens about a public developer. What you do is come in here and try and ram your bill through, throw political stunts, political tantrums. What? For what? For what? To get this Mickey Mouse bill through, which might help 0.2%, 0.2% of renters, while making life harder for the 99.8% of people renting in this country. Well, we are not going to let you do that. We have just circulated a motion which asks you to delay this bill for a couple of months and come and talk to the Greens. All that is going to do is make things better, while under your bill, millions of people lose out. That is going to be the outcome of the bill that you're trying to ram through. Come to the table with the Greens. Stop these political shenanigans. Be serious about this. You have been talking about the housing crisis as if it is a serious issue, and it is the most serious issue in this country. When we knock on doors every weekend, that is the first thing we hear about. People are so worried about their rents, about the increases, unlimited increases in rents that landlords can now just impose on them without any restrictions. Every single day, we are hearing how people are struggling and suffering. But you are so stubborn that you somehow want to attack the Greens, whatever your reasons might be for that. Stop being like children. Come to the table. Stop throwing these tantrums every day. Come to the table. Talk to us. We are willing and ready to negotiate with you. What more do you want? But you have completely disregarded any of the Greens' asks that we have put on the table. People are telling us, vast majority of people are saying they do want a freeze on rent increases. Communities are telling us this. We are listening to them. That's why we are fighting in here, like people are fighting out there, to do something, to act on this housing crisis as if it is a serious thing. The ball is in your court now. Come and talk to the Greens. We have 2 more months if we get this motion through. 2 more months.
Thank you.
2 more months, but then...
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. Well, when you have a vote that goes down 19-41, when you've got the whole crossbench, the coalition that's voted against this, it tells you something. It's a dog of a bill, an absolute dog of a bill. And this is why it's not going to work. This is, again, your pie-in-the-sky schemes about your housing. And to listen to Senator Murray-Watt, it's about, we're denying the young generation to own a home. You have done that on your own with your economic policies that you brought in here. You promised people $275 cut in electricity, never happened. You promised them about the voice, that never happened. You've made so many promises in this country, and about, climate change, that's another dog of a bill that you have as well. Let me just explain to people about this bill. You want to put another $5.2 billion to build housing in Australia. Now, rather than looking at your high immigration levels, and that's the whole problem, is that high immigration, you can build these houses, but you've had an opportunity now for the last 2 years to actually build houses. Guess what? Not one house has been built, but you've put $35 million plus into administrative costs, yet not one house. That proves that you're incapable of following through and producing for the people of Australia. Apart from this $5.2 billion, overall your housing policy is going to cost $32 billion. That's what they're putting out, to build 1.2 million houses. But let me tell the people in the gallery and the people watching this. Apart from high immigration, between 22 and 23, you brought in 737,000 people. Why I mention this is because you haven't even got the people to build the houses. That's the joke about all this. Because 737,000 people brought in between 22 and 23. 51,605, off the top of my head, had skills. Of that, only 1,800 were construction workers. What's happened in this country, and it was only because of my push to actually have apprenticeship schemes, and I put that to the Parliament, which was passed by the coalition government, that 100,000 apprenticeship schemes were taken up under my policy in Australia. We haven't followed that through. No one's done anything about it since. You haven't pushed for more apprenticeships. You actually just want to bring in people from overseas, but we're not getting them. And there's another thing that you haven't addressed, is foreign investment. In the last census night, there was approximately 1 million homes that were vacant on census night. A lot of these are foreign investment homes. Do you know foreign investors aren't really allowed to buy in Australia? They're not establish housing. They can only buy new properties. But no one follows through and investigates this because you let it go under the radar. You know why? Because state governments want to have all these foreign investors come in, which drives up the cost of housing in Australia, and then it's the state governments make so much money out of stamp duty. This is what happens all the time, that the public are scammed, and that's why the high cost of housing in Australia, because foreign investors. Now, I have been opposing foreign investment in Australia of our housing stock, plus also prime agricultural land, or any land for that matter. I'm pleased to hear that under Peter Dutton's leadership, the coalition are going to look at suspending it for 2 years. It should be for longer than that until we address the housing market. Now, remember, a lot of deals are done behind the scenes that it could be the UN, it could be the World Economic Forum and different ones that we sign. We sign deals and treaties with them behind closed doors. That's the government. We in the parliament here have no idea what we've signed away. But isn't it quite interesting if you know of Klaus Schwab? You heard of him? How often does he say from the World Economic Forum, you will own nothing, you will own nothing, yet you will be happy? Do the public really trust the government to go into a part ownership with the government in their housing? Honestly, the only person that you can trust in your own owning partnership in your own house is yourself. That's why One Nation brought out the policy to allow Australians to use their own superannuation scheme to buy their own home, not investment properties, but their own home. That was One Nation's policy, and it was taken up by the coalition. You see, to be a member of parliament, you need to have vision, and you guys haven't got it.
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy President. And nothing I've heard in the suspension debate will convince anyone other than the blockers working together to stop a vote on Help to Buy. None of you, and Senator Hanson, with all due respect, shared equity schemes have worked and do work across Australia and have for a long time. And the idea is that you help people into home ownership, and then when they've, down the track, they're able to buy out the other partner. It works. What it means is people don't have to save as long and as hard for deposits and other money before they can actually get into owning a home. And so part of why we're having this debate is because we want the rest of the country to see the Greens political party, the National Party and the Liberal Party and One Nation and Clive Palmer all working together to make sure that we don't get a national shared equity housing program up and running. These are the same people that delayed the Housing Australia Future Fund for almost a year and then have the nerve this week to come out and say, well, it's taken too long to get these the housing programs funded through the scheme that we actually delayed for more than a year in this chamber. The hypocrisy is on show for everybody, and we are pleased to be the ones arguing for more investment into housing, to get more people to own their own home, but at the same time supporting renters, at the same time pushing for more supply, working with states and territories. The approach the Albanese government has taken is one which comes at this housing challenge from every direction. We don't seek to make it someone else's responsibility or accept that only one program will help. We don't accept that ransacking your super is going to do anything other than inflate housing prices, and most of the opposition, I think, accept that. They accept that if people ransack their super, housing prices will be inflated and it won't build one extra house. But you have to come at this from a variety of ways, and what we've seen today is this extraordinary procedural dance, the use of quorum to prevent a vote being taken, a filibuster that went for 9 hours yesterday so that we didn't get to a vote, all because the Greens political party and the opposition are uncomfortable that they're together, but they're still going to be together anyway because they want to wreck and stop a sensible housing program which the states and territories have agreed to, have agreed that it's a proposal through National Cabinet that they support. That's what's happening today. And all this hand-wringing and sobbing and pain that everybody's feeling for everyone out there, well, excuse us for not taking that seriously. I mean, honestly, Senator Faruqi, your argument is because it doesn't help enough people, we shouldn't do it. No, that's what— no. Your policy was a shared equity housing scheme. We remember. And now you come in here and say, talk to us, we really want to help you, but it doesn't help enough people, so we're going to say no. But give us an extra 2 months for us to go and complain about the government doing nothing on housing, which is what you do when you go out there, and pretend that you're at the negotiating table. I mean, what a load of rubbish. 290 days this has been sitting here. 290 days. You've said you oppose it. You said it's going to make the problem worse, and then you say, "Come and talk to us." And in 2 months' time, we'll work out whether we think it's the right thing to do. Well, please, honestly, I mean, we are not suckers on this side. We get what's going on. Politics is being played. You're uncomfortable that you're helping Peter Dutton, Mr. Dutton. You're very uncomfortable with that. But you're making a habit of it. You're making a habit. I mean, how many times this week have you voted with the opposition to frustrate Labor's housing program? Just how many times? We'll add it up at the end of the week. We will add it up at the end of the week, because that is what's going on here. You are enabling Mr. Dutton and his team to frustrate a progressive housing agenda. That is what you are doing. And we will make you vote that way and show the rest of Australia that's exactly what you're doing.
Senator Ruston, you have about 4 minutes, I think.
Thank you, Deputy President. Well, instead of coming in here and sprouting a whole heap of rhetoric, those opposite, maybe we should actually have a look at what is the problem that is before us and why the coalition is not prepared to support this particular bill. And that is because it is a really bad bill. It does not do what those opposite are professing that it's going to do. And I would draw the attention to the minister who just made a contribution in relation to stoking demand. I think probably be worthwhile realising that the legislation that is currently before this place is a demand-side policy by your government, and by the very nature of it being demand-side, your policy is likely to generate increased inflationary impact on the market as well. So you can't have it both ways.